What's up? It's Mike Mal, and you are listening to the Athletor Podcast, where we dive into the processes, mindsets, strategies of some of the most successful athletes and coaches from all walks of life. You're listening to the Athletor Podcast, and this week's guest is Alex Clemsen from the University of Maryland. And one of the things that we really kind of dig into was his road to head coaching at a Division I level. Might look a little bit different than some, and actually some of the people that he took over for and some of the people that were in his past, how they've dealt with Division I coaching level, especially as a head coach. We also get into some of the pitfalls of weight cutting as a youth wrestler, and also how he's developing kids to go up in weight. Seems to be working out for him too. Athletor Podcast is coming up next. Coach Alex Clemsen, how are you, sir? Thank you so much for giving us some time.
I'm having a good day. Appreciate you guys having me on.
Yeah, you are. It's funny, dude. It's funny that you brought up some fundraising stuff, and that has actually been a topic that Joel and I have been not just like digging into, but like we're focused on it, right? Because that has become such a big part of the job that if you're not great at it, you are going to be left by the wayside in the NCAA for sure. Am I correct?
100%. And in full disclosure, I'm probably not as good as I could be at it because I don't enjoy it.
No.
I want to coach single legs, right? And I want to help kids, and
Right.
I want to be in that wrestling room as much as possible. Like, I think about when I decided I wanted to be a wrestling coach, and I look back to my days as a student athlete with Coach Flynn and Coach Roselli at Edinboro. I in a like perfect world, in an idyllic world, I would have the same lifestyle that they had. I would have the same, routine that they had. Unfortunately, in the last 20 years, the landscape has changed and it's shifted and it's a lot different. And it's taken me some time to get my head wrapped around that too and what that looks like. And so I'm really lucky that I've got a great staff that works with me. And I always try to really not say they work for me, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I always try to say it's our staff and it's the staff, not my staff.
Mm-hmm.
Because I really feel that way, that the guys that work with me and really poured into what we're trying to get done have just, really spent a lot of time and energy and have invested a ton. And I'm super thankful for their contributions. But because of that I have such good guys, I can miss a morning practice here and there and go to breakfast with a donor, or I can, step away from, a film session if I need to have a donor call, because I know Coach Brascetta, Coach Laird, Coach Oliver, and now Coach Matthews are really doing a good job. And before Cole got to town, we obviously had Coach Mellon for, our first 5 seasons. And as much as he's missed, the staff has really gelled quickly, the new staff, and we've gotten a lot of great stuff done.
Here's the thing though, Brascetta, everywhere he goes,
he's the man.
People can't say enough good things about him.
Oh yeah, he's the man. So his older brothers wrestled at Oregon State, and my first job in wrestling was in Corvallis with Coach Steiner and Coach Zaleski. So that would have been the 07-08 season.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Johnny was a redshirt freshman and Dan was a redshirt sophomore when I got there. And those guys were 65 and 74. And I had been an 84 pounder. And so we worked out a lot together. And so I've known Nick since he was like 10 or 11 years old. And back then everybody called him Nicky.
Right.
Nobody calls him Nicky anymore except me. And so when I first met Nick's wife, Ash, I kept calling him Nicky, and Ash was like, "Who is Nicky?" And I'm like, "That little mother effer is." So, because in my head, right, that's the little crazy nut job that was running around camp and being mischievous and ornery, but also tougher than crap. And I tried to recruit him when I was at UVA, and he chose Tech, so that was fun because I think he beat our guy like every time. And then when I was thinking about, assembling my staff, he was on my really short list. And obviously he joined me and has been, with me since day one. And we just promoted Nick to associate head coach,
Hey,
and a title that is well beyond deserved and earned, probably a year late or two on, and some of that strategic with the administration and trying
sure.
to get guys raises and things. Nick and I talked about that, and he knew that, what we were trying to get done. And so if my administration's listening, playing chess, not checkers, boys. Sorry.
Chess. Always chess, son. Always chess. All right, we
But
got to get back to fundraising.
sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Fundraising. Yeah, it's something that never stops, right? I mean, you're always engaging in it, and you're always trying to create more touch points, and you're always trying to bring more people into the fold. Um, it's a hard game, and it's not a fun game, and it's an awkward game. And it takes time. And we're finally at a place, right, where we're going into our sixth season, and we built relationships with, people in the region, and with alums and donors, and those relationships are starting to bear fruit. And I think people are starting to see the growth, and they can really feel the direction of the program instead of us just pitching the
Right.
vision. They can get a sense for it. And so we're starting to see people respond with their checkbook, and that's awesome.
Yeah.
To see people feel what you're doing, and be excited about it is exciting. So really thankful that people have been generous, and people are excited about what's going on, and want to help. Right, it's the chicken and the egg. So people are starting to give us some eggs, and hopefully we can grow some chickens.
Yeah. Well, you said it yourself. It ain't easy. Okay.
No,
First of all, what was the hardest thing for you to adjust to in terms of fundraising when you got a head job? Because like there has to be, I think of it this way, like when you become president of the United States, they probably give you a handbook and like, all right, here's what really happened to JFK. Here's where the aliens are. And but they're always missing something, right? And so it seems like when you become a Division I head coach, they give you a handbook, but there's some stuff that just ain't in there, dude.
I didn't get a handbook. I wish I had. I think the biggest thing I got was 5 years with Brian in Columbia.
Mhm.
And Coach Smith really, I think towards the last probably 3 years, if not a little before that, started to really give me some autonomy, and brought me into the fold on a lot of different things. I got to sit in on head coaches meetings for him. I got to sit across from the administration with him on certain things. I got to go on asks with him, and the donor breakfasts and lunches, and I think that really prepared me more than anything. Just as he continued to, I think, look at me as a partner with him, and super thankful for my time in Columbia. Overall, from a personal standpoint, obviously it's where I'm from a professional standpoint, from the growth I got to have, and from the success I got to be a part of. But I think the biggest difference was, instead of being the guy that is the sidekick, right, where I get to add a funny line here or there, I get to, there's no pressure on me. I'm just getting to know somebody, and talking shop, or investing in someone's, the relationship, just from a purely like, hey, I just want to get to know this cat. Now I have to do that, and then I have to still make the ask. And you have to be the guy that's like, hey, we're trying to raise $250,000, and here's what we want to use it for, and here's what we want to do with it. Would you like to be a significant part of that? And anytime somebody writes a check, it's significant, right? Because everybody's pool is different, right? Like, yeah, just because you have $10 billion in the bank doesn't mean you want to give away your money. And just
Right.
because you have significantly less than that, and you're going to write a $100 check, $1,000 check, whatever the check is, it's still, you're giving away your money. And
Sure.
so anytime someone invests in your program and invests in your kids, they are giving away their resources and their family's resources. So it's a big deal no matter what it is. And I really treat it that way. And I just think that's the biggest difference is like, at the end of the conversation, at the end of the breakfast, at the end of, cocktails, whatever it is, you have to say, hey, by the way, can you open your checkbook up? And sometimes, based on relationship, that's easier than others, but you always have to do it. And
Right.
it really sucks when people are like, no. I've been fortunate. Not very many people have told us no. They've said,
Right.
hey, we don't want to give you this much, or we can't give you this much, or we'd like to see you do a little more before we give this much. And we're starting to do that, and people are starting to, open up even more, and that's fun.
I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that. I remember when maybe a year into you getting the gig, I think I was working at Flow at the time, and you very quickly changed the narrative from that guy's good for Maryland to that guy's good. And that spoke volumes to me. Like, oh, no, we're not here just to be better than we were. We're here to be really good. Did you know that you had to change that narrative immediately? And if so, what was that kind of like going? Because that stems from your room. You have to tell these kids, no, we're not just good for where we were a year ago. We're good.
Yeah, I think it comes down to just like how competitive of a person I am. And then I think obviously Coach Brascetta and Coach Mellon, Devin wrestled at Missouri. He was on teams that won a trophy and beat Iowa in Iowa and beat Okie State in Stillwater. And Nick was on a team that won a trophy and won a lot of big matches. So I think we just were like used to being around a certain caliber of kid and coaching a certain caliber of kid or being on a team with a certain caliber of kid. And so we knew what that felt like and what that looked like. And that's who we wanted to coach. We wanted to coach guys that want to be great. And so we went out and said, who do we have relationships with, and who can we connect with, and how can we get those relationships and connections to hear our vision and buy into our, what our future is going to look like. And the first person that did that was Jackson Smith, obviously, right? I mean, he was like, 17-year-old scrawny little kid from Atlanta, and credit to Coach Brascetta. He was like, this dude's different. I'm telling you, I felt him. I've been in a room with him. He's going to be special. And I think he was right. And I had known the Miller boys a long time from my time in Columbia and being over to Park Hill and, with recruiting different people through that program and building a relationship with the head coach previously there, who was John Ernesty's dad. And then getting to know the guys from Greater Heights with Omar Padilla, who's now at St. Pius, and Jason Keck, whose son wrestles at Little Rock. Those guys are, they're the driving force behind Greater Heights, or at least they were.
Yeah.
And so it's, we just were like, we need to chase some of these guys that can compete in the Big Ten right away. If we don't, it's not going to change unless we change it. And so we just started probably chasing kids that were better than we should have been. And we just, we knew we were going to get a lot of no's, but at some point someone was going to give us a yes, and somebody else was too, and somebody else was too. And that, first domino fell with Jackson, and then it was Braxton, and then Ethan flipped. And the way that worked was a whole nother story, and maybe a conversation for a different time. And that was hard for me because, he flipped from the place that I came from, and the way I think people perceive it on the outside, anytime there's a flip, they think you flipped them, and that's not the case. We hadn't talked to Ethan in 6 months, and I'll turn my phone records over and my DM records over. And I think Ethan always wanted to get out of the state and do something different. And I think it's hard to make that decision sometimes when you're young and there's different pressures and different forces at play. And he woke up one day and was like, no, I need to get this right before I get
last week or something like that. And yeah, everything's coming from Flint. 100%.
Yeah. And well, I don't want to take credit away from Tim, but I also want to give Coach Roselli his due also. Right. Sure. I always tell people Lou's Yoda.
Right.
He's a wizard, and I hate that Pittsburgh got him. But I'm really happy that Pittsburgh got him, right? Because I think it's good that Lou Roselli's in college wrestling. I think it's good that Lou Roselli's helping 18 to 22-year-old humans, because I know I benefited from that, dynamic duo of Tim and Lou.
Can we talk a little bit
I love those
about
guys.
And I'm going to tread real lightly here because I don't want to step on your toes. And here's the God's honest truth about it. There are some folks that are just not made to be head coaches. Maybe Lou Rosselli is one of them. Maybe the guy you took over for is one of them. What do you think that those guys have or don't have that makes it really difficult? I'll tell you what, I don't know that Lou Rosselli was the best fundraiser. I don't know, but that's what you need to do now in order to be successful.
So I don't know either. It's really hard. And I'll say, I've tried really hard not to speak of the previous regime here. I get asked a lot, what do you think people were doing or not doing? I'm like, I don't know. I wasn't here.
Right.
I have a really good relationship with Kerry McCoy.
And he's a great dude. And he's a great wrestling coach.
I've known him a long time, right? He used to go to Baumgartner's camps in Edinburgh, right? And work the heavyweight camp. And those guys would train. Some of the workouts I got to see, like I would sit around at night and watch, Bruce would go parterre back then with these guys and he would turn every one of them. Yep. Like you name a guy, right? Jameel Byers and Kerry McCoy.
Steve Neal told me it was the gnarliest gut he's ever seen.
Yeah, and none of them could turn him either. It was awesome to watch. But I've known Kerry a long time. One of the first phone calls or text messages I got saying congrats was from Coach. He took me to lunch on one of my first days in College Park. I mean, that's the kind of the quality of human that Kerry is. So I don't know, I think there's a myriad of circumstances and Lou is literally one of my best friends. I mean, I tell the guy I love him. I mean, I think the first time I told him that, I caught him off guard because he's like the old school upstate New York guy. When I was like, I love you, man. And he was like, kind of looked at me and I was like, I mean, not like in a weird way, dude. I love you. Like, I appreciate everything you've done for me. He's like, oh yeah, I love you too, dude. So,
don't make it weird, dude.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think fit is part of it. I don't know if Oklahoma was the right fit for Lou. Like, I think Lou could be a great head coach. Maybe Norman isn't where Lou should be the head coach at, though, sure. Right? Or for whatever reason. This one's hard for me. I understand. I don't want to punt on it, but at the same time, it's like I'm a little jaded and biased.
Well, how about this? Someone that you're not as close to, right? Because obviously McCoy was there right before you, and you're very close to Zoe. But guys like Kevin Jackson, I don't think he really has an interest. And I'll say this with Kevin in the room, like KJ is one of the best technical wrestling coaches in the world. He is. But he has I don't think he has any interest in glad handing any of the ISU alum and that kind of stuff. It's just that
I don't know. I don't know KJ like that. I will say that like I got to be coached by him when I was at the training center in college, and he is a phenomenal coach. And everywhere he's gone as an assistant, he's made an impact. His tenure at Iowa State probably was not as good as his tenure as an assistant has been in other places. And I think you could say the same for Coach Rosselli. Right. So, yeah, I don't know what their interest is or what their love is. I will say this. There are times where I've had to smile when I didn't want to. Mm-hmm. There are times where you have to say something in a response that maybe you didn't want to say. Mm-hmm. There are things that I've had to do that I don't want to do. Mm-hmm. Maybe I've done enough of those and those guys didn't from time to time. I don't know.
Not only is that a diplomatic way of saying it, but it's true, right? Because there are things that you're going to have to eat crow on in front of some of these donors that I don't see Lou Rosselli.
Yeah, maybe not. I think people that probably know me say that I'm probably wired similarly, and they're surprised to hear that I do that. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, like I said, I'm really, really competitive, and I know that you catch more flies with honey sometimes.
No doubt.
So it's been tough at times, and I think with that competitive side, when you don't have as much success as you want to have, that's been tough also. And then you're going and asking for money, or you're going into a top level recruit's house, and they're like, "But this score looked like this, or this result looked like that," and you're like, "Yeah, I know, we're trying." trust me, we're trying. Come to the room, feel it, get to College Park, get in front of our kids. You can sense the change. We're this close. So, and I really believe that, that we're that close. And it's just, somebody's got to do it. Somebody's got to break through. I thought it was going to happen in Kansas City. And from a personal standpoint, being a Missouri kid, it would have been really cool if it would have happened.
Right.
I'm at peace that it didn't. And now we need to make it happen in Philly.
Okay. Did the new scoring rules change anything about the way that you coached tactically at all?
Yes.
Tell me.
Well, I think how you're looking at the end of a match and how you want to take risk or not take risk when you know you've got a stall call to give or 2 stall calls to give, with a takedown being worth 3 instead of 2. I think that really changed it. If you have a takedown and escape and you're wrestling somebody, you know, and they only have one escape, or it's 4-2, you know, you're probably less likely to take as much risk as you would have if the takedown was only worth 2, right? If it was 3-2 or 3-1.
Sure.
So I think that changed a little bit. I also think we have continued to invest more time in top.
Yeah.
Knowing that you can now get a 3-point near fall and a 4-point near fall. I always thought it was weird when we went to 2 and 4 that we skipped right over 3. It was like,
Right.
wait, that doesn't make sense. So I also think it's changed what we do with our lineup sometimes in dual meets, trying to, you know, make sure we're not giving up a major, right?
Which are way easier to give up now.
They are. I actually would be a big proponent. I think we should go to 10 points for a major.
Okay.
With the 3-point takedown and the near fall differences. Mm-hmm. And then also with what we do with our lineup or how we attack a match where we know that we can exploit a score, right? Like,
sure.
We might be more inclined to cut a guy earlier than we would have because you can get a 3-point takedown, and then maybe you have 2 or 3 takedowns in your back pocket.
6-1 going out of the first is a monster lead.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe that softens a guy up so that you can turn a guy late, or you can turn a guy maybe earlier than you would have thought. It's funny. 2 of the best guys I've ever been around teach top, Ben Askren and Hudson Taylor. Both talk about the fact that sometimes you have to soften a guy up before you can rip him over. And that's something that we've talked about too with the new rules, is maybe you do that from your feet more than you do it from the top position now.
Yeah,
especially with how they call stalling on top now.
Yeah, and then that's a good point. That's a really good point, because they're going to let you get away with stuff. Here, okay. The next question is going to harken back to what we talked about earlier and your vision for success. What does success look like for the Terps going into the 24-25 season, right? Like, look, here's the thing, right? Everyone says they want to be national champions and stuff like that, but you have to really grade yourself with the athletes that you have and the schedule that is put in front of you.
Yeah, so I think it depends on what our dual meet schedule looks like from the Big Ten. We don't have that yet. We have our non-conference schedule. I also think it depends a little bit on what we do with our lineup. We're a little undecided on what's going to happen with Freddie Miller. That's Cal, right? What we do with Cal, he's going to double jump to 57. So, you know, Ethan is a 49-pounder, right? They're brothers. They can't wrestle off for the same spot. That's why Cal didn't wrestle well down the stretch. It wasn't like there was something wrong with his wrestling or he had issues, you know, emotionally or mentally with like pressure. He was starving. Like he already, I mean, I hate to say that, but he was amazing.
Oh, it's true.
Right? Yeah, I actually felt bad for him. There was a point in the season where I was like, or down the stretch where I was like, this might be too much. And he's so tough. He just like wouldn't complain. And we were right. We were in for a penny, in for a pound at that point. Like you just had to make it. And, but he's already weighed 170 pounds.
Jeez,
and so,
really?
And he looks great. I mean, his body looks great. I mean, he's got a big frame. He's got long arms. He's got long legs. And so the question is do we just double jump him and roll him right up there like Michigan did back when I was in school with Steve Luke and Tannenbaum, or do we let him grow into the weight class and redshirt, and I think that probably determines some of the dual meet and individual success we have, and that's not a knock on other guys in our room.
No.
Just Freddie has proven that he can be a top 10 guy, and other guys at that weight class haven't shown that yet. So that's a big change. And then there's another lineup possibility with a true freshman being in our lineup and redshirting another older guy. And I think that kind of will determine what we look like from an individual standpoint. I think from a team standpoint, there's probably not a ton of change there, but individually, I think there could be. So, we've had 5 qualifiers the last 2 years. I think anything less than that's probably not successful. I would like to see us get to 6, 7, depending on what we do with our bullets, right? With Cal, probably influences that a little bit and our ability to take the next step. And then we've cracked the top 10 now in the Big Ten standings this year. And, I'd like to see us continue to climb up the ladder to 8 to 6 to whatever the ceiling is right now. Again, Freddie scoring points, in Chicago that weekend probably helped determine that also. And then we need to punch a guy through at in Philly. And honestly, I think 2 need to happen. I'm going to be disappointed if it's not multiples, right? If it's not a crooked number. So,
but it's
then
you're talking about tough weight classes too, bro.
We are, and the COVID guys too, right? We have a bunch of COVID.
There's a few,
and we're a young team,
right.
And that makes it tough. And we're starting to get to be seasoned and to be older, but when you have a senior class that's still doubled up, I mean, I think like if you look at Flo's preseason rankings, like over half the ranked guys are all in their final year of eligibility. Right. At every weight class, and at 84, 97 in heavyweight, I think it's 14 at each one of those weights. It makes it hard, when you double up a class with the COVID kids. So we can sit here and whine and complain about it, or we can say, hey, we need to be that much sharper and that much more prepared. That's the reality we live in. So that's what we choose to do.
Look, we're roughly the same age. When we were growing up, the mindset was always cut as much weight as you absolutely can.
Yeah.
But now we're seeing that not only do you not need to, you're probably more productive if you don't. Where did your brain shift on that?
Well, I think I was never a huge weight cutter personally. It was probably my sophomore year of high school. I cut to 152 and I grew in the middle of that season. And I almost ran out of gas before the state tournament. The state tournament could not have come quick enough. And then I jumped to 71. And that's probably where my brain personally grew, where I was like, dude, if you just eat really healthy and you work really hard, you can wrestle at a really high level. And so that's what I did personally in college. I never wrestled 74. I wrestled 84, and I probably early in my career was a 74 pounder. So I think from a personal standpoint, my brain kind of got there. And then when I was at Missouri, going back to lessons learned, Jay Nyerman in the middle of the year jumped to 41 and I think was like 5th in the country. And the road that he went on at the Nationals that year, the guys he beat included McKenna, Kolosnik, and somebody else 3 in a row, to take 5th. And then Daniel Lewis, moving up to 74. And it's like every time we move the guy up, he just did better. So I think as long as a guy is disciplined with his lifestyle choices and he's disciplined with his diet choices, moving up is not a bad thing. And
do you still find resistance from the athletes? Because
I think we're seeing it the opposite. I think we're seeing where guys are like, hey, look, I'm tired of fighting the scale. I'd like to move up. Braxton was the one anomaly. he was like, no, I'm a 25 pounder. I'm going to make it. And I'm like, dude, do we need to watch the film again? Bro, you don't look good. Like, your wrestling, it's not even like your wrestling's bad. Like, you don't look good. Like, how you're presenting yourself out there. Like, doesn't that bother you? And that's ultimately the conversation we had. And I was like, do you think that's the best representation of you? And I think that's when the light bulb went off. And he was like, no. And I was like, okay, well then we have to move up.
Yeah.
And yeah, it might be really hard. The horsepower thing, it might feel differently, but you'll get used to it. You'll adjust. And he did right away. I mean, his first match up was he beat, I don't know if he majored him or it was 6 or 7 points at least against Santiello in the pit duel. So I think when guys get their heads wrapped around it. Now I say this, we have a guy that's going to move down a weight class, and I think people are going to be like, wow, really? And I actually think it's the right move for him.
But I struggle with it. There's a kid that is next bedroom over to my office right now. And his high school coach said, you're going up, bud. You're going up. But he's like, no, I'm 30. No, you're not. First of all, you're growing a lot. Second of all, you're putting down 6,000 calories a day. Like, you're just going to grow. And I think maybe it's more of a high school thing where these kids just want to cut. And to his credit, he's actually pretty good at it. Like, he's disciplined on this, like going to the scale. So he's like, wow, that's an asset that I have that you're taking away from me. And I'm like, no, not really. Your discipline can be forced towards the nutritional choices that you make.
Yeah. And getting an extra lift and getting an extra technique session and like, if you're on full feed, you don't have to worry about recovery as much. If you're on full feed, you don't have to worry about how you manage your energy output leading up to a competition. If you stack workouts at the end of the year, your bank account's grown really big, and you try to get kids to think about it from that perspective, that it's like, hey, how many more deposits can you put away, as opposed to how many more withdrawals do you have to make when you're cutting. So
because you gotta go get on the bike instead of whatever.
Instead of getting on the bike, you can drill, or instead of getting on the bike, you can lift. And I think as the season goes along, it's a big deal. You're seeing some of the better kids shift that philosophy and that thought process, where they're wanting to do more of allow themselves to grow as opposed to cutting. And I think that's really good for our sport also, when
I agree.
Some of the elite kids are leading the way there.
I'm actually I'm working pretty closely with the P&L now.
Okay.
And one of the things that I'm looking to, I really want to be kind of the tip of the spear for this stuff. And I want to try and get even closer to first whistle. I want to get weigh-ins closer. Now, whether that works out for a college level is beyond me, but for a youth level, I want to do a rolling weigh-in where these kids weigh in, maybe not right as they're about to wrestle, but a half an hour beforehand. I want them to weigh in, and then the next weight class, they weigh in a half an hour before they're about to wrestle, and then the next weight class, they weigh in a half an hour before they're about to wrestle. And I think that's
interesting.
I think we can get rid of a lot of these knucklehead dads that are cutting the legs out from these kids to make weight for, let's call it Tulsa Nationals or whatever the heck that is.
Well, I think from a developmental standpoint, it's probably a really healthy, good idea. I'm not sure that works, like you said, from the collegiate level.
Right.
But yeah, we're like our own worst enemy, I think, at the developmental level. Kids wrestle too many matches in a season. They're wrestling probably too many days a year, and they're definitely, as a whole, probably cutting too much weight. And I just think kids need to be kids. Like, there's nothing wrong with playing house soccer. There's nothing wrong with taking swimming lessons. There's nothing wrong with playing flag football. I just, or whatever your sport is, I think kids should be engaged in multiple sports. That doesn't mean you can't wrestle at some capacity year round. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying
Mhm.
3 and 4 nights, 5 nights a week in a wrestling room, 11 months a year isn't good for 11-year-old kid. Even if they love it, even if that's like what they want
Doesn't
to
matter.
do.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah. Take it away from them. They'll love it. They'll want it even more. Like
100%.
make them go play soccer, make them go to swimming, make them, they'll want to be in that room even more. And
100%.
I just yeah, my son doesn't wrestle. People are always like shocked by that. So I have a son that's going to be 13 here in 13 days, 14 days, 2 weeks, 2 weeks from today. He is just over 5'8". He wears a size 11 shoe, and
Jeez.
he's about 150 pounds. So we just cut weight. He plays football, and they do weigh-ins to not be a red stripe, so he can
Mhm.
advance the ball. He's got some good skills. So we did a little weight cut for that, and he had to be 146. He had to be 145.9. They do like UFC where it's 145, but you can weigh 145.9. And so we did that. And people are like, oh, 4 pounds. It's like, well, for a kid that's never cut weight before, 4 pounds was 5 pounds was a little bit of work for him. And the interesting thing is they do it now, and the season will start here in 2 weeks. So we did it last Sunday. Season starts in 2 weeks from that. They do another weigh-in before the playoffs, and they do that weigh-in literally, I think it's an hour before the game starts, and you do
Okay.
it in your cleats, your socks, your girdle, your pants, and the shirt you will wear underneath your pads. And
Okay.
they have a growth allowance, obviously, and then they also have an equipment allowance. So it's 13 more pounds than what your weigh-in was in August. That will be the weigh-in in November. So it's interesting. They're doing that weigh-in before the playoffs, really close to game time to kick
1
off.
hour before.
1 hour before kickoff. Yeah, your first playoff game. So,
Yeah. Look, man, I think anything we can do to get these kids and look, you want to take 5 pounds off to make football team, that's fine. And you do
yeah,
it
it was one time, right?
right one
In
time, that's
August.
fine.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. I'm seeing these kids cut their nuts off every single time.
Yeah. I
Once a
know.
week. It's not good, coach.
It's definitely not good. And I would say if you do any research on injuries
Mhm.
and depression and different things that affect young people, when you take calories away from your body, the likelihood that whether something physical or emotional / mental will affect you goes up exponentially as you take calories away. And
Mhm.
um, I would encourage people that to do their research. And it doesn't mean you can't lose some weight. It doesn't mean you can't be lean. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't be really fit. All those things can be true with still not, like you said, cutting your nuts off every week for
It seems,
silly trophies.
yeah, silly, meaningless trophies. Alex Clemsen has never called me once and asked what the kid did at Tulsa Nationals. Not once, not in the history of ever. So
I doubt any Division I coach has, right?
no, never,
Yeah.
never, never, never. So yeah, it seems to me like it's going in a different direction. Like I said, when we were kids, man, everybody
Yeah.
was cutting a lot.
No, it's true. It's true. Yeah, it's
And
true.
it's going in a different direction, and that's a positive thing. And I think it probably has more to do with professionalism and coaching. Like there's some, David Taylor had a wrestling club up until very very recently. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
he
And
looked
you
at
think
that
about,
was.
right? I mean, I'm a product of that, right? I think you and I probably, right? You talked about our age. These clubs were just starting,
Mhm.
right? When we were like finishing our high school careers, like Nick Perler was just getting going. I think I was his first Division I All-American ever, and I didn't get to go to him until the spring of my junior year. He had basically only been in business for 6 months before that, or 9 months before that. So our sport is definitely benefiting from that, from a bunch of people that are highly knowledgeable, getting back into the youth specter of our sport. I think that is a really good thing for sure.
How we're running out of time a little bit, but what does that landscape look like in Maryland right now?
There's some really good guys running youth organizations.
Okay. Tell me about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, John Noggle is actually, so when my son wrestled for a year out here, that's where I took him. He's in Columbia, Maryland. He runs an awesome youth program. His two boys are, one is at Air Force and one is at Harvard. We tried to recruit them both. And when the younger one made his decision, I called him and it's funny. He goes, I'm sorry. And I go, I'm not calling to beat you up. I'm calling to say congrats. You got one kid at Air Force and one kid at Harvard. Like,
You
dude,
did all right.
you're doing something really, really well. You and your wife should be really proud. So he's an awesome guy. Max Meltzer, Alan Meltzer's son, right? Max was an All-American at Harvard. Same year, I was an All-American at Edinburgh. We've known each other a long time. He started the Capital Wrestling Club. That's right, not very far from me either in Gaithersburg. John Morrison was part of that initial push, and that's where Meyer did a lot of his training down the stretch. Helen was there for a while.
Yep.
The Capital Wrestling Club is continuing to grow and get better. I could plug. Gosh, there's some guys that have been doing it, a long time.
But there's a culture being built.
I think so. Dan Ricker up at Warhawks, where Kyle Snyder got his start, has been around a long time. He's kind of stepped back recently. There's a new group that's kind of come in and revitalized Warhawks. That guy's name's Mike Hartsville, and his wife Melissa kind of continue to re-energize that outpost. And the guys up at the South Carroll program with Brian Hamper, the Maniacs, those guys. There's some guys over at the Eastern Shore. There's little pockets, right? Jason Kiesling's got his club. Jason Gabrielson's got his club. There's a lot of little pockets that are seeing growth. I know John Brooks is involved over in Hagerstown as well with his two little guys coming up. So you're going to probably see that area continue to grow and get better. And then I think with what we're doing in College Park with the DMV RTC, right, where we're running club practices all fall and spring and trying to get the best kids around the not just the state, but the region onto campus and into our room and in front of, Cole Matthews and Elijah Oliver and Ethan Laird really consistently, and pulling, the best kids together and trying to have some really good practices. That helps as well. And so I do think Maryland right now, to me, looks how Missouri looked 10 years ago.
And Missouri
is taken off, right? It's really taken off. And there was kind of like always pockets and factions in Missouri. There was a few guys here and a few guys there. And now you're seeing, with both Pearlers in Kansas City and St. Louis. And then obviously, Ironman was in Central Missouri. He's kind of pulled back, but now Sammy is back in Central Missouri and he's got his bull train going. And so I think that's really good for the state. You're seeing, some really high level coaching going on across the state as well. I think Maryland's really close probably to having, more and more guys come out that are, Aaron and Kyle and even Meyer, are really, really elite kids. And maybe Maryland will continue to produce really elite kids, but I think you're going to see more kids maybe the next step down where you
also have to think per capita too. Like, it's a small state, right? Like,
it is, but there's a lot of people.
There is. It's densely populated. But it was funny. Yeah. I still keep, like, I went over to Russia a bunch of times, and I still keep in touch with some of the guys there. And this was in 2016, and it was Helen.
Yeah.
It was Snyder, and he's like, so basically Maryland's like Dagestan, right? I'm like, well,
sure. Yes, it is. Just the same.
Sure.
But gosh, right. And now you look at Aaron and Meyer has competed really well in the age group.
Sure.
And I think there's some other kids that are going to come up in the age group stuff and do, really well. And that's cool. And I think that's a credit to some of these guys, Kramer Whitelaws and Chris Browns, and some of these guys have been around a long time that have given back to the sport in the, DMV and the greater Maryland area. There's some really good people that have really poured a lot into kids. And I think it's really, the state's really close to continually producing kids of Division I, national qualifier, and All-American status. And I'm sure we'll continue to produce, unicorns because of it's being densely populated. But Aaron Brooks and Kyle Snyder, Helen Maroulis they're aliens. I like to remind John that I've built a good relationship with Mr. Brooks. And I'm always like, you sure you his dad? He's not from like Vulcan 9, right?
Yeah.
Like, I give John a hard time.
Somewhere. Yeah. He's not built in a lab. He's a freak.
Yeah. Yeah, he is. Yeah, he is. And he's a great kid.
No, he is. Okay. All right. We're scooting on time here. So I'm going to ask you a couple questions here. Try your best not to think about them too much. Just fire off an answer. These are our quick questions. Okay. Number one, what is the best wrestling shoe of all time?
I have to say Rudis. I'm contractually obligated.
Good. We like that.
I really like, obviously going back to my competitive days, I think the Rulon, the original Rulon, the OG, the first couple years of them were really, really good. Yeah. I personally love the way the Alphas, the Rudis Alpha fits my foot. I know a lot of our guys like that shoe as well. So
okay. All right, there we go. All right, number two. You only get 4, and they got to be American. Who is on your Mount Rushmore of wrestling?
It's really easy. Bruce Baumgartner is the greatest American wrestler ever. He has 13 world level medals. Anybody that does not consider him the GOAT is a false prophet. So Bruce is number one. I think John, right? Mm-hmm. John W. with mm-hmm. 6 straight world titles is number 2. Helen is the greatest female wrestler, right? The only one with 3 world level medals. And then, number 4 right now, I probably got to give the nod to JB.
Okay. I like that. That's a great list, by the way. That in that order, that is a great freaking list. I like that one a lot. That's not our first Helen sighting on the list. It's our third.
Our third one.
Okay.
Yeah, I think what she just did, winning, you have a medal at 3 Olympic Games, and then you think about her career, probably maybe was slightly limited with the head injury stuff that she went through. But maybe that also motivated her to wrestle longer and wrestle this last cycle. So I don't know, right? You can always give and take and go back and forth, but that's my 4.
Love it to death. All right, last one. You have a magic wand. You can change one thing about the sport of wrestling, and it changes immediately. What would that be?
Oh, gosh. Yeah, I think if I could change one thing, I would make every Power 4 institution in the country have to have wrestling.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so Florida Gators have a wrestling team, and Alabama.
Texas Longhorns.
Yeah, UT. Oh, for sure. Yeah,
UCLA, right? Oregon Ducks. They most of these places have had a wrestling program, right? You think we talked about KJ earlier. Think about the team that was on at LSU, right? Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Right. We all know the story there. I think what that would do for our sport and how it would grow the popularity and what you could do with the championship then and to do a meet championship. And I think if every Power 4 school had to have our sport, I think what it would do for our country and what it would do for our society. I think wrestling is, I think Kale wrote a letter, right? An op-ed, open letter about why his sons will wrestle. Here I am, my son doesn't wrestle. At least I made him try it, right? He did it for a couple of years. It might not be for everyone, but it doesn't mean you shouldn't try it. It doesn't mean you should be exposed to it. And I think it's a really good thing for people. It's the most inclusive sport in the world.
Yeah.
Right. Guys and girls can do it. Tall people, short people, wide people, skinny people, jacked people. Right. A guy with one leg can find a way to be really, really successful. So it's not a sport where you have to have a lot of money to produce an environment, right? You look at the greatest Olympic wrestler right now, right? A guy that has 5 Olympic medals is from a really, really poor place in Cuba. So you know, some of the greatest guys in the world are from Dagestan, a very economically depressed place. I think it's good for our culture and our world to have wrestling.
Understood. I think it's good for our culture and our world that you are kicking a little bit of ass out there in College Park. Thank you very much for coming on the program, man. I really do appreciate it.
No, my pleasure. I appreciate you guys having me on. Love talking wrestling. Love talking about what we got going on in College Park. So I appreciate the platform.
All right, brother. Thank you.
Yeah, be well, guys.
Wait. Don't go anywhere before you hit that next button. If you enjoyed listening to this episode, do us a huge favor. Click that subscribe button. And if you're so inclined, leave a review and share it.
What you want to know, man? Welcome to the show.